So once again, another NASCAR season has been kicked off, and the 2024 Daytona 500 has come and gone. But was it a good race? It seems on social media that the NASCAR world is indifferent on how well the race actually was. From various strategies in mid-stages to the controversial finish at the end of the race, this is a full review of the 2024 Daytona 500. The first thing I'd like to point out is the overall improvement in the broadcast team from the last few years to this year. It seems that Mike Joy showed a lot of energy in his commentary, as early on he gave us a good jump scare.
Oh, crash! Two cars slam together and Harrison Burton takes a wild ride through the grass and up into more traffic, gets tagged, turned around, and 5 cars are in it.
Another positive thing about the broadcast team was the addition of Kevin Harvick. In the past few years, Fox has been searching for that secure number 3 analyst on their team, and I feel like with having Kevin Harvick and his serious attitude, it allows for the broadcast team to be taken more serious instead of Clint Boyer being a goofball in the booth like the past few years with Fox. But I will say Fox's production is still lackluster compared to NBC, so moving forward, I wonder what will happen to the production team's coverage. Now this is the point of the video where it's going to get a little controversial, as people are indifferent about how the actual racing was during the 500. To the average person, the racing passed the eye test. Early on, we saw a lot of cars break into individual packs during green flag pit stops, and it reminded people of the old super speedway racing days in the early 2000s and late 90s. But this is because they were trying to stretch their fuel till the end of the stage. At one point, there was a massive pack that was only running 175 miles an hour, not at full throttle, just to save till the end of the stage. Being in the grandstands, I can confirm that at one point, AJ Allmendinger was running faster and catching up to a group of cars that were at least 15 to 20 deep by running full throttle at 180 miles an hour by himself. Now, there was 3-wide racing during this race, but unfortunately, if you look into this, that is because the leaders were saving fuel once again, and that's why they were able to be a third lane. This isn't actually 3-wide racing, but more so just riding around with 3 lanes, not at full speed. By far, this was an exciting race to our eyes, but it wasn't because of the car and its ability. It's just because of strategy. They're running around 3 wide, but they're not actually racing. They're just in lines parading around. It would be no different if there was a second lane, but just because they got up to 3 wide, it let fans think that the racing was good. We haven't seen good super speedway racing since the old car and the old package of 2019 to 2021. I will say that the lack of cautions in this race allowed for the racing to get the way it did, especially with the single file and fuel savings. With little cautions after the first 5 laps until almost the last 10 laps of the race, there were no causes for incidents outside the stages, meaning the field couldn't bunch back up together and get racy. So a majority of the time you were seeing the single file, but that's also a product of the lack of cautions. I will say it is impressive that there were only 5 cautions, 2 of them being for the stages and 3 of them being for cause. Usually in these super speedway races, we see a lot of big wrecks early that kind of diminishes the packs down and lets the racing get lackluster. They waited till about 10 laps to go to cause that, and now we're going to get into what actually happened for the end of the race and my opinion on it. But I will say the lack of cautions is a good thing. Another controversy with this race was the big one that happened with less than 10 laps to go, and how many people are blaming different drivers for this. I saw people blaming William Byron for spinning Brad Keselowski. I saw people blaming Ross Chastain for throwing a late block. I saw people blaming Alex Bowman for a bad push. But honestly, when I look back on this, I don't see anybody that's single-handedly blamable. What I see here is a typical last few laps with a super speedway race where one guy's going for something, another guy's trying to block it, and the next thing you know, you have a deal where there's the big one. It was unfortunate that this wreck was as big as it was. It took out a lot of guys that were dominant earlier in the race, and it diminished the field almost down to half, meaning that on the final restart of the race, we we're going to have a lot of cars that were fighting at the end, able to generate runs and maybe get 3-wide racing, because that's what this car needs, is strength in numbers. You can't get a run when there's less cars, and that's why I feel like people are upset with the wreck, because it took away that from the cars that were so dominant earlier, and at that point there was 3-wide racing happening. But I want to reiterate that I feel like this wreck isn't blamable to one driver. I feel like this is just a product of super speedway racing, and I feel like the people that are upset with what happened are just upset because their driver got taken out. I don't think it's one person to blame. I think that, once again, this is the product of these races coming down to the last couple laps. It's good that we made it this far so that we can have enjoyable racing to this point. Now we finally reached that point in the video where we get to talk about the finish of the race and why it was so controversial. Now, many fans hate that we didn't get a full 500 miles, but it is also ironic that last year's Daytona 500 extended beyond 500 miles and people were so upset with how that one went. And once again, with this incident, you have people that are blaming different drivers for what happened. People are blaming Corey LaJoie for giving Austin Cindric a bad push. People are blaming Austin Cindric for losing control of his race car. And people are blaming Ross Chastain for shooting a gap that wasn't there. Once again, you're coming to the white flag of the Daytona 500, the Super Bowl of stock car racing. You are going to do whatever you can to try to win it. Yes, it's unfortunate that it didn't go as planned for all these drivers and they all wrecked, which threw a caution. And I will say the caution was the correct call. It's unfortunate that NASCAR decided to throw it right after they took the white flag 100 feet after, but the cars were spinning to the inside unharmed, and then Austin Cindric corrected and came up into traffic. The moment he comes back up into traffic, the caution has to fly. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it has to be. And I see people who are comparing Truck Series finishes and Xfinity Series finishes when they threw the caution a lot sooner. Yes, those cars were already crashing in the middle of the racetrack. NASCAR simply thought these cars would spin to the inside unharmed, so they didn't want to throw the caution. The minute that car starts coming back up the track, they have to throw the caution. As much as it stings and as much as it taints this whole race, this Daytona 500 finish is correct. And I'd also like to throw this in, and I know I'm going to be standing on thin ice when I say this, but in the 1998 Daytona 500, only 2 cars spun harmlessly down the back straightaway, and NASCAR threw the caution immediately. And I don't want to say it's to give Dale Sr. the win, but I'm just saying, if it was a more popular driver that won this race or somebody that wasn't William Byron, I feel like people wouldn't care as much. If Corey LaJoie, if Ross Chastain, if an underdog wins this race, even with the same finish we just had, fans would not care. Just because it's a Hendrick driver, they care. And I'm not a Hendrick fan. I like all drivers. I don't care for anybody. I don't dislike anybody. I just love racing. But I will say that fans need to realize that this is the correct ending for this race. And also, Alex Bowman is not the winner. There is a delay between the caution lights and the caution graphic on the broadcast. The moment the button is pressed is when the caution came out, and that was when William Byron was still ahead. So let me know what you guys think of how you like the 2024 Daytona 500, or if you didn't like it, let me also know what you didn't like. And as always, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.